everyone, and welcome back to Dees Nerds. I'm Michelle, and today I'm going to be doing a review of the Sookie Stackhouse series. Spoiler alert, it's not. Okay, so if you don't know anything about these books at all, these books are called Southern Vampire Mysteries. They are by Charlaine Harris, and they are the basis for the HBO show True Blood, which I'll be talking about a little bit at the end of the video. So this book series is 13 novels. And then there are also some collections of short stories and additional pieces that go along with it, which I have some of those here. But I'm mostly going to be talking about the novels, and then kind of if you're going to choose to read any of these extras, what things you absolutely need to read and what things you can skip. So the basic premise for these stories is that Sookie is a small town waitress in a town in Louisiana. It is a fictional town, but its location is actually really close to where I was actually born and raised. So I always find that really interesting that a lot of the places that she talks about are places that I've actually been, and some of the things that she's done are things I've actually done. So I always find that really cool for my part. But the concept is she's a barmaid, she's telepathic, so she can hear inside other people's minds, which sometimes makes her to react to things strangely, and most people think that she's crazy to some degree. In the world that she's living in, though, vampires have come out of the coffin. So they've revealed themselves to the world, and they've become a generalized part of society. So they're not hiding anymore for the most part. They've got synthetic blood that they're able to drink, and that's actually what prompted them coming out. And they're supposed to be made in Japan, and once they figured that out, vampires went on TV all at once one evening and said, hey, we're here. Being in the small town that she's in, vampires have been out for a while, but she'd never actually seen one. And one night, one comes into the bar, and she realizes that she can't hear him. So her telepathy doesn't have any effect. He's just a blank to her. That's how she describes it in the book, is just finding these blank spaces when she reaches out toward their minds. So, of course, in these books, as they are mysteries, there's always, for some reason, I guess, somebody always dies. You know, there's various reasons why that happens, but that's generally what the problem is that there's a murder that somehow Sookie becomes a part of having to solve, either because she's involved somehow with the situation in which it took place, or because she has to use her telepathy to help them solve the problem, or whatever it is. And she begins to date this vampire that she meets. So there's also an element of romance to them too. And her vampire in this book is named Bill Compton. He is actually a former Civil War soldier. He was turned after the Civil War was over. So there's that bit of interest to it too. Now, of course, in 13 books, she does not stay with him the whole time. But in this first book, that's the main character, the main love interest here. And there are quite a few different characters over the course of these books that she is in a relationship with to some degree. In addition to just vampires being in these books, we also get other supernaturals. The other one we get werewolves, and then we have shifters, so they can change into any animal, and then we have various other kinds of wares that can change into other specific animals. And then we also get witches later on down the line. So there are quite a few different things going on. Not all of them are known to everyone, so Sookie becomes kind of a part of this strange underground social life, and while she's still living a very normal life on the surface. And she lives in an old farmhouse kind of out in the middle of nowhere outside of town, and Bill Compton the vampire lives on the other side of the graveyard that is in between their two houses, kind of outdistanced. So as far as what I think about these books, I do think that over 13 books, as you might expect, there are some highs and some lows. So I think that the first book is exceptionally good, and I think the premise was really interesting. It's a lot of fun. You're not expecting a lot of what's coming. As we go through, though, because of Sookie's telepathy, she becomes a matter of interest, especially to vampires who want to use her for their own means. Especially in these two books. This is the second book and the third. She gets very much drawn into some things that she would have not had anything to do with if she wasn't hired/coerced by the vampires to go and do some work for them. As we continue on, we do get some other things in there. Some of the things that she deals with are more personal to her, and then some of them are things that, like I said, she's hired out to do. And I will say book 1 is excellent, and I think book 4 is my other favorite of some of those early ones especially. In book 4, there's another vampire that she's met with and dealt with to some degree in the first 3 books named Eric, and he becomes a very big part of the story in number 4 and becomes a love interest or an almost love interest for a long time, finally becomes an actual love interest, and then things kind of go a little bit not where you're expecting. So there's definitely, with that, some ups and downs as we go through there. There are some of these books that honestly, there's one part of them that will save them, but then some of them are honestly, for a lot of them, is really boring. There are a couple that I would definitely say are like that. Now, if you look at the series as a whole, it's great. But I would say these books are best served to binge read. So if you're going to read these, binge read them, because there are so many characters that might show up in one book and you don't see for another couple of books. There are some characters that you don't see for several books at a time, then all of a sudden they're brought up again. And so if you're reading them with a lot of distance in between them, time-wise, you may not remember who those people are. I'll explain this particular situation that I had with that when I get toward the end of my talk here. But like I said, they're really short books. These are all right around 300 pages. I know at least one of them was actually under 300 pages. So they're very readable, they're very quick, they're very easy. If you enjoy mysteries, they're a lot of fun. And then if you enjoy that vampire aspect, they can also be fun too. When you get to the last book, I would say this was probably the worst offender for dragging characters back that we haven't seen for books and books and books. Because when she decided to wrap up the series, she really wanted to bring back in all these beloved characters from the other books. And I think she even says in the back of the ebook version, which of course came out after this, I guess after some people had a chance to ask some questions, that there were more characters that she wanted to include, but she just couldn't find the way to do it. And in my original review of this when I read it, which I did read this on release day, that some of the things that she threw in felt like too much. Like we were trying to do too many things at once and try to include everything because we were never going to see them again. And so I think this book was trying to do a couple too many things for how short it is, because it's still under 350 pages. So while it was cool, I love the way it ends. I think the way it ended was absolutely perfect, but some of the things we have to go through to get there were a little excessive to me. But I still really enjoyed this ending. I know some people had a major complaint about the ending, about who she ends up with at the end of the series, but I actually thought it was perfect and made complete sense to me based on the character that's been built up over 13 books. So definitely think as a whole series, it is so much fun. I blew through these in a little over a month. So that's 13 books in a month, just for reference if you're trying to keep track there. That's a lot of books, but they're fast. Like I said, she did come out also with some other short stories, and I have a couple of different compilations. Now she's done another one since then, actually a couple since then. This used to be the complete stories of Sookie Stackhouse, and they fit in between the other books. And I think in this one, they also tell where they belong. Some of these are really good. Some of them are just kind of boring. And some of them are just totally unnecessary. But there are a couple that if you don't read them, there's some stuff in the books, the main books, that really don't make sense. And that was one of the comments that the author made. I've seen her make it on Goodreads. She answers a lot of questions there if you read this and have questions. But she also answered it in the afterword in one of her books. She said that she learned from her experience with writing some of these short stories to never put essential information to a series in a short story that's not a proper book in the series, because a lot of people were completely confused about some events. So if you're going to read these, the absolutely essential stories, I believe One Word Answer is the one that triggered her saying she would not put essentials in there anymore. So that one's really good. And there's one that I don't think it's in this book. I think it's in a different one. But there's one where she has to go to a wedding with her boss, Sam, who's also her best friend. And there's a pretty huge story point in that one as well that I feel like if you don't read that book is not going to make a lot of sense. And that might be what's in this one. I can't remember to be sure. But this is another book that she did with a bunch of kind of extra reference stuff. And then this one as well was what she wrote after she finished all of these. She went back and wrote this. And when I saw this, it said, "What came next in the world of Sookie Stackhouse?" Which to me is like, yay, follow up, what happened to my characters? So when I got it, I wasn't expecting what I got, which is essentially like a little encyclopedia of all the different characters. And it gives some brief information about them and then what happened to them later, which wasn't really what I was going for. I really wanted a story again. But I guess I should be glad to at least have an idea of what happened to these characters. On the whole, I'd say the tone of this series is, it's light, it's fun, it's got a little bit of gore, it's got a lot of romance, sometimes it's a little bit sexy. The language is occasional, and I would say used when it seems like it makes sense. We're not dropping F-bombs for no reason as adjectives and verbs and nouns and everything. It's, when somebody's scared or upset, it comes out occasionally. So it's not excessive if those things bother you. And the sexual moments are, I'd say, pretty light. I mean, you definitely get a little description, but it's not graphic. So I think overall they're mild, and like I said, they're light and they're fun. Which brings me to the HBO series. So the reason that some people found these books was because of the HBO series. I was actually recommended these books by a couple of friends at the first place where I taught, and so I read the first lot of them. I think about the first 10. Pretty close together as I was borrowing them from those ladies. And so then I learned that there was a show, so I was really excited to watch it. And at the time, I think there were either 1 or 2 seasons available to watch. So I went into them expecting them to be very much like the books. And to some extent they are, especially the first season. I think the first season follows the books pretty well, at least in regards to the stuff that happens to Sookie herself. Where it goes off is what happens to the other characters in the show. There are some characters that they completely changed everything about their personalities. Her friend Tara is a completely different character to me in the show than she is in the books. In the books, she's supposed to be someone who came from a rough upbringing, which definitely Tara in the show is. But in the books, she's kind of risen above it and become sort of classy and trying to, making a real point to take care of herself and make her own way. And she has her own business and all of this stuff. And then I feel like she was very much kind of a mean and hateful, liked to drink a lot, swore a lot kind of character who just didn't seem to fit the bill to me of what I had in my head for that character. I would say like Sookie and Bill and Sam and Eric, Lafayette, who should have only appeared in the first season technically, but ends up being back for the rest of the series. I'll get to that. But he was really cast well too. I think for the most part the casting was good. And I don't think that the casting for Tara was necessarily bad, but I think they just changed her character way more than what was necessary. And just in general, I mean, it's HBO, and I really didn't have a lot of exposure to anything HBO before that point. But as we know, HBO's favorite things are swearing, blood, and boobs. And you get a lot of all of those things in this series, which really bothered me because I didn't feel like that was at all the focus of the books. And also just in general, after that first season, the threads of story that are from the books that are carried over into the show get so thin until finally there's nothing left. I think probably up through, I'd say maybe season 4, there are recognizable story threads. And I think there are 7 or 8 seasons of that. I want to say 7. But I think those last 3 seasons, I don't think there was anything out of the books anymore, really. Maybe moments, but the overall story threads became highly political and just not what the books were about at all. I feel like the books were very much focused in on Sookie and what she was going through and kind of her dealings with other supernaturals and the men that she was, in relationships with and what she wanted her life to be. And it turned it very much into this vampire politics trying to mimic real life politics, and just, I mean, it sucked all the fun out of it to me. And that's, to me, why I wanted to read this series, is because it was fun, and that HBO series is, after a while, especially not fun. And I've been thinking lately as I've been reading these, I almost wish I could do a supercut of like the parts of those shows that I liked that fit the books, because I would love to rewatch those parts, but I don't want to have to sit through all of the rest of the stuff that I did not enjoy at all just to see the parts that I did enjoy. So I don't know. I'm still thinking through that. Do I want to try to watch it again? Because honestly, I fought and suffered my way through all of those seasons because I wanted to see if the end would be like the awesome ending that this had. And spoiler alert, it's not. That was infuriating. They ruined the ending of this. And the thing is, like, people talk about that with Game of Thrones, how they ruined the ending of that series. But at least with that, they didn't have the end of the books. So they were just making it up after a point. They had all of the books before this series was over. They had no excuse for the things that they did to this series, other than they just wanted to make it more HBO. And I don't think they needed to. It's a good story as it is, and I just think they did a lot of things that messed it up. So I don't know if that's a popular opinion or not, but that's my opinion. I would say definitely go and read the books. And if you feel so compelled at that point, go check out the show. But the minute you start feeling like, ooh, about it, just back away. It's okay. You don't have to finish it. I finished it for you, and I'm telling you now, you do not need to. But you may find that you like it for different reasons. I just really didn't. I found it frustrating. But I highly recommend you go and pick up these books, especially if you went through your phase where you enjoyed Twilight or anything like that, these are better written, honestly, and more fun. We're lacking teen angst. They're all adults here. So I think our main character is 25 when the stories start and is nearing 30 by the time the book's finished. So she's definitely an adult. I hope that this was interesting and that you maybe have a better picture of what the books are like versus what the show is like, and which one of those things you might want to try and tackle. And I think that you should definitely give them a shot. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit like and subscribe and ring the bell for notifications whenever we post a new video. Also, please leave me any comments if you've got suggestions, if you've got thoughts about these books or this show. If maybe you watched the show and had no idea there were books, or you watched the show and never read the books, I'd love to hear your perspective, because having read the books first maybe kind of ruined that show for me. Although I don't know that I would have finished the show if I hadn't read the books, but I'm getting off on a tangent. So anyway, I'm Michelle, this is Dees Nerds, and I hope you have a great, safe rest of the day. Bye!